In an office on the 60th floor overlooking the streets of New York, billionaire Elise Harrington stood before Noah Reid, a low-level employee, and coldly delivered the words, "You're fired." No one in the room knew it was only a test. But Noah's response made Elise freeze, changing the way she would see him forever. He didn't beg. He didn't rage. Instead, he looked her in the eye and said something that shattered every wall she had spent years building. What did he say? Noah Reid woke up at 5:30 every morning to the sound of his daughters breathing in the next room. Their apartment was small, a one-bedroom in Queens with thin walls and a radiator that clanked through the winter nights. He had given Annie the bedroom. He slept on the couch. By 6 a.m. he was making her breakfast. Scrambled eggs, toast, and orange juice. Annie sat at the table in her pajamas, hair wild from sleep, coloring in a book while he packed her lunch. She was 6 years old. She had her mother's eyes. His wife had died 2 years ago, in a car accident on the FDR Drive. One moment she was alive, texting him that she'd pick up milk on the way home. The next, police were at his door. After the funeral, Noah spent 3 months barely functioning. He missed work, ignored bills, let the apartment fall apart. It was Annie who pulled him back. One night, she crawled into his lap and asked if he was going to leave her too. He held her tight and promised he wouldn't. He kept that promise. Now he worked at Harrington Hotels and Dining, a high-end restaurant in Midtown Manhattan. He was a server and occasional bartender. The pay wasn't much, but it covered rent and Annie's school tuition, barely. He picked up extra shifts whenever he could, sometimes working doubles just to stay ahead. On nights he worked late, a neighbor watched Annie. On early mornings, he took her to school before dawn and paid the counselor to let her wait in the library. He never complained. Complaining didn't change anything. By 7:15 they were on the subway. Annie held his hand and talked excitedly about her upcoming school play. She was going to be a tree. Noah listened and smiled, even though exhaustion pressed behind his eyes like a weight. He hadn't slept well in years. At 8 a.m. he dropped her at school, kissed her forehead, and took the train back to Midtown. He arrived at the restaurant by 9, changed into his uniform, and started prep. The restaurant didn't open until 11, but there was always work to do, polishing silverware, folding napkins, restocking the bar. Most of his co-workers ignored him. A few were friendly, but most saw him as temporary. Someone who wouldn't last. He didn't mind. He wasn't there to make friends. He was there to provide for his daughter. What none of them knew was that the woman who owned the restaurant, the woman who controlled everything, had been watching him for weeks. Elise Harrington stood in her office on the 60th floor of Harrington Tower and looked down at the city. From up here, people were ants. Cars were toys. The noise of the streets didn't reach her. She liked it that way. Distance made decisions easier. She was 32 years old and had been CEO of Harrington Hotels and Dining for 5 years. Before that, her father, Richard, had run the company. He built it from a single hotel in Boston into a chain of luxury properties across the East Coast. When he retired, he handed her the reins with one condition: prove she was strong enough to hold them. Richard Harrington believed in tests. When Elise was 16, he cut off her credit cards without warning and told her to survive on her own for a month. No help, no safety net. She worked 3 jobs, slept in a hostel, and ate ramen for weeks. When the month ended, he took her to dinner and told her she'd passed. It was the closest he ever came to saying he was proud. She learned from him that sentiment was weakness. Trust was a liability. The only way to know someone's character was to take away what they needed most and see how they reacted. Now, as CEO, she applied the same philosophy. Instead of letting HR conduct standard performance reviews for the company's year-end evaluations, Elise decided to handle the process herself. She devised a test. She would call employees into her office one by one and tell them they were fired. It wasn't real, of course, but they wouldn't know that until the meeting ended. Their reactions would reveal everything. Who begged? Who raged? Who accepted it with dignity? Who crumbled? Then she would tell them the truth. Her assistant thought it was cruel. Elise didn't care. Cruelty, to her, was simply honesty without decoration. Over the next 2 weeks, she tested 12 employees. A line cook. A housekeeper. A front desk manager. A bartender. Each walked in expecting a routine evaluation. Each heard the words, "You're fired," and reacted. Most cried, begged, or argued. None of them surprised her. Until Noah Reed. He came in on a Wednesday at 2 p.m. between lunch and dinner service. He knocked, entered when she told him to, and sat down. He was taller than she expected, lean, with dark hair and tired eyes. His work uniform was crisp but simple. He carried himself with a quiet steadiness that caught her attention immediately. Most employees entered her office like they were walking toward a guillotine. Noah looked calm. She didn't waste time. "You're fired," she said. Noah didn't flinch. He didn't fidget. He just looked at her, still as stone. She wondered if he hadn't heard. Then something shifted in his expression. Not anger. Not panic. Something softer. Something like grief. "Thank you for the opportunity to work here, Miss Harrington," he said quietly. Elise blinked. She wasn't expecting that. But he wasn't done. His voice gentled, almost pleading. "But if I really am losing my job today, please don't tell my daughter. Let her believe I'm still trying my best." Elise froze. This man, this quiet server, had just pierced a place she didn't know existed inside her. A warmth she didn't recognize, mixed with guilt, tightened in her chest. She broke protocol. "It was a test, Mr. Reed. You're not actually fired." Noah blinked, stunned. She tried to explain. "I wanted to see how people react under pressure. Most beg. Some get angry. You thought only of your daughter." His jaw tightened. "That's cruel," he said softly. She lifted her chin. "It's effective." Noah stood. He nodded once, polite but cold. Before leaving, he looked back at her. "I hope you found what you were looking for, Miss Harrington." The door closed behind him. And for the first time in years, Elise felt the sting of regret. That night, Elise stayed late in her office. She pulled Noah's employee file. 2 years at the company. Never missed a shift except when Annie was sick. Always requested early schedules so he could pick her up from school. Minimum wage plus tips. No complaints. No disciplinary actions. Just steady work. There was a note from HR, wife died in a car accident. Raising daughter alone. Elise closed the file slowly. She thought of her own father. The tests. The lessons. Strength means surviving without help. Independence is power. But looking at Noah's file, she wondered if her father had been wrong. Maybe true strength wasn't surviving alone. Maybe it was surviving for someone. She spent the next weeks watching him through security footage. He arrived early. Stayed late. Helped coworkers without being asked. Never complained, never slacked. He left early each day to pick up Annie. One manager wrote him up for it. Elise threw the report away and changed the company policy to support parents. 3 weeks later, she went down to the restaurant during dinner rush. She rarely visited the floor, but something drew her. She watched him behind the bar, moving with calm efficiency. A server dropped a tray of glasses and he was there instantly, helping her clean up. He smiled at a couple. He laughed, really laughed, with a coworker. The sound surprised her. It filled her chest with something warm and unfamiliar. That night, she lay in bed thinking about Annie. And about love. And about the kind of man who had so much of it. She wondered if she'd ever know what that felt like. Then disaster struck. Annie's evening babysitter fell and broke her wrist. Noah had no one else. No family. No backup. He panicked and called the restaurant, asking if he could bring Annie, just for tonight. Elise overheard the call and silently nodded. But she couldn't go home. Something made her stay in the building. At 8 p.m. she went down to the restaurant. The dinner rush was chaotic. And in the corner near the dishwashing station, Annie sat on a plastic crate coloring quietly. Small, fragile, out of place. Noah brought her chicken tenders and kissed the top of her head. Annie grinned up at him. Elise felt something twist inside her. At 9:30, someone ran to her office. Annie was sick. Feverish. Crying. When Elise reached the kitchen, Noah was holding Annie in his arms, voice shaking as he tried to comfort her. "I called a cab," he said, desperate. "But none of them are answering." "Come with me," Elise said instantly. "My car is downstairs." The hospital kept Annie overnight. Noah stayed by her side, holding her hand while she slept. Elise stood by the window watching them, something aching inside her chest. Hours passed. "Why did you really do that test?" Noah finally asked. She told him about her father. The tests. The cold lessons. The belief that love was weakness. Noah listened, tired but gentle. "My wife used to say strength isn't surviving alone," he said. "It's surviving for someone else." Elise felt something shift inside her. "I didn't have anyone to survive for." Noah studied her quietly. "Maybe you do now." At dawn, Annie was discharged. Elise drove them home. Noah thanked her quietly and carried Annie inside. Sitting alone in her car outside his rundown building, Elise realized her father had taught her how to survive. But not how to live. 3 days later, a photo surfaced online, Elise carrying Annie into the hospital. Noah behind her. Headlines exploded. Billionaire Elise Harrington's secret child. CEO spotted with mystery man and little girl. The board panicked. Stock prices dipped. "We must contain this," the CFO said. "Fire the employee. Distance yourself." "No," Elise said calmly. "If you don't handle this, we will," the board warned. She walked out. That night, she stared at her phone. She typed and deleted a dozen messages to Noah. Nothing felt right. Nothing felt enough. The next morning, the board issued an ultimatum. Fire Noah Reed or step down as CEO. She called Noah in. His face was pale, tired. She hated what she had to say. "I need you to take a temporary leave of absence." Noah stared at her. "So you're letting them win?" "It's not." "Yes. It is." He stood, voice steady but heavy. "You tested me to see who I was. Now I know who you are." Her heart cracked. "I thought you were different," he said. "I was wrong." He left. For the next 3 days, Elise barely slept. She replayed his words. She realized, slowly and painfully, that he was right. On the 4th day, she made her decision. She drove to Queens in the rain, climbed the stairs of his building, and knocked. He opened the door, expression flat. "What are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you." She told him everything. She apologized, not with excuses, but with honesty. She told him about her fear. About how much he meant to her. About how wrong she had been. She placed an envelope on the table. A new contract. A major promotion. A salary 5 times higher. Full authority over restaurant operations. He stared at it. "Why now?" he asked. "Why not 3 days ago when I needed you?" Tears stung her eyes. "Because I was afraid." Afraid the board would hurt you. Afraid of losing everything. But I lost you anyway. And that was worse. He didn't speak. Then Annie appeared in the hallway, rubbing her eyes. Daddy. She saw Elise. Miss Elise. She ran to her and hugged her. Elise froze, then slowly hugged her back. Annie looked up worriedly. Why are you crying? I'm not sad, Elise whispered. I'm happy to see you. Annie asked if her dad was still going to work at the restaurant. Noah looked at Elise. Something softened. Yeah, baby, he said. Daddy's still working there. Annie clapped. Good. I like Miss Elise. She's really nice. For the first time since her childhood, Elise almost laughed through tears. 2 months later, Elise stood at a podium before reporters. She told the truth about the photo. About Noah's promotion. About her mistake. I used to believe vulnerability was weakness, she said. I was wrong. The bravest person I know is a man who asked me not to tell his daughter he'd been fired, because he didn't want her to think less of him. Noah Reid taught me what real strength looks like. Some board members quit. Others stayed. But the people who mattered supported her. 3 months later, on a cool spring evening, Elise stood on the rooftop garden of Harrington Tower. She had it built for employees' children, but mostly for one little girl. Annie ran around chasing a butterfly, her laughter echoing between buildings. Noah stood beside Elise. She loves it up here, he said. That's why I built it, Elise replied softly. For all the kids. She smiled. For all of them. But mostly for her. Noah shook his head, smiling. You're something else. They'd been seeing each other for a month now, coffee mornings, weekend dinners when Annie stayed with her grandmother. Slow. Careful. Real. Annie ran to them holding a flower. This is for you, she said proudly. Elise knelt and hugged her. Thank you, sweetheart. Noah wrapped an arm around Elise. Annie held both their hands. The sun set over the city in shades of gold and pink. A family. Imperfect. Complicated. Real. For the first time in her life, Elise felt like she was home.